Introducing Recorded Content, a podcast for small, scrappy B2B marketing teams who want to get the most out of podcasting. In each episode, we capture stories from industry experts and podcasters. Listen in and uncover what it takes to launch, run, and grow a successful B2B podcast. Check out and subscribe to the show on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. Let's jump in.
Hey, this is Justin Brown. I'm the co-founder of Motion and your host for this episode of Recorded Content. Recorded Content is brought to you by Motion, a done-for-you podcast agency for small, scrappy B2B tech marketers. Today, I'm joined by four-time tech CMO, former speaker at HubSpot's Inbound, current hostess of the Restaurants Reinvented podcast, and the self-proclaimed Mama de Marketing herself, Jen Kern, the CMO at QPOS Software. Jen launched her podcast during the pandemic and has been using it to punch above her weight class, her words, not mine, ever since. This episode will talk about gaining industry insights, leveraging repurposed content to become a media publishing master, and building an audience through genuine conversations. Enjoy. All right, so Jen, in our very first conversation, which I know you and I have talked about a few times at this point, you told me that you don't listen to podcasts because it wasn't a medium that you loved. And now you're maybe one of the biggest podcast evangelists that I know. And I think that there is a lot of confusion with heads of marketing or CMOs around what you really get out of a B2B podcast. So as a longtime CMO who has launched your podcast in the last year with now over 30 episodes recorded, how would you describe what you get out of a B2B podcast?
Wow. So first of all, thanks for having me on the show. That's
Absolutely.
quite a way to start out. Very humbling. Yes, I did in fact say I don't listen to podcasts. I think in our first conversation when you essentially called me, and I don't know if I said that when you asked about coming on your podcast or if when you were trying to sell me doing a podcast, but
no, it was, I at that time, I was really employing the account-based podcasting approach, which was get prospective people, which you fall directly into my ideal customer profile, which I think since then we pretty much use Jen Kern as our ideal customer profile, CMO, tech company, small scrappy team. And we're actually going to talk about that more in today's episode. But yeah, I was like, you came on and then I said, okay, thank you for coming on to my show. Would you be open to maybe hearing about you running a podcast? You're engaging on the microphone, blah, blah, blah. I think you said you wanted to do maybe some live stuff at the time. And then you said, you know what? If you think this is the way this is going, I'll give you a try. I was actually surprised that you said that, but I was happy to go down that path with you. But yeah, I think that's where the conversation started and came from.
And it was early in the pandemic, right?
Yeah, I think I went back and looked. We did that interview in April 2020. So right as people were being, shelter in place, trying to figure out ways to continue to make and publish content online without being able to leave their homes. And I think it was just a good time for you to take a look into podcasts. And you're like, all right,
Yeah. I think staying open is always good, right? Staying open to anything. But I actually like recounting that story, Justin, because, stories are so interesting to me. And you're right. I remember the very early days of the pandemic. There was a lot of live LinkedIn stuff going on. People were like scheduling live LinkedIn videos. And I'd be like going down to my kitchen for lunch and I'd just click on whatever popped up in my feed as a live if it sounded interesting. And I was doing that. And I liked the very last minute nature of it. And I liked the community aspect of it. And I liked the engagement part of it. And so I was kind of like thinking, how can I do this for my business at the time? And you started talking about podcasting. And honestly, I wasn't listening to podcasts at the time very much. There's one podcast that Nadine Dietz does that I had listened to for years, which was the CMO podcast. I forget the exact name of it, but I think she was the first one to do like a CMO podcast. And she would always interview huge companies, huge CMO stars, which wasn't really, as you mentioned, my persona. My persona is a small, scrappy marketer. That's what I've been my whole career. And so I love thinking back to that because I then went into this phase where not only did I start listening to a ton of podcasts, mostly because of the pandemic, I got to be honest, because I'm an extrovert. I like being around people. I like community. I like talking. I like listening. I like learning, right? I like interviewing, and I like that. And so I was going for a lot more long walks than usual with the extra time we all had on our hands. And I was listening to all sorts of different podcasts. I was listening to podcasts about meditation. I was listening to podcasts about marketing. I was listening to podcasts about books to read. And then, the timing was interesting because then I came on your podcast and then you kind of started like soft selling me. And I was open to it, and it ended up being just the right thing at the right time. And yeah, now I'm a big evangelizer of podcasts, and you've convinced me that. And then I started quickly saying, fast forward 8 months after I had done about 30 episodes, and I started saying, oh, podcasts are getting oversaturated. Everybody's doing podcasts. And now there's this big, like Christopher Lockheed on your thing said it, like, if you think podcasts are saturated, you've got your head up your beep.
Yep.
And I love that. I'm like, yes, I do. And I've been convinced by you and other, well-known podcasters that it's not oversaturated.
But I think that where the misconception is among CMOs or heads of marketing is that's what it is. It's just that like very small channel. And I think that what you've experienced, but I don't want to speak for you, is that it's much more. And so I'm curious, in these last 8-10 months, whatever it's been, actually, I think it's been almost a year now since you started podcasting. What is it that you see that you really get out of a B2B podcast?
Yeah. So yeah, you're right. I mean, so they're staying open to whatever it is that, new things in marketing. That's important for a head of marketer. But at the same time, we're constantly inundated with new things. And yes, podcasts seemed like just another new shiny thing. So we need to kind of understand that. And so my experience has been, what have I gotten out of it? I mean, it was my lifeline in the pandemic. Podcasting was literally my lifeline, professionally and personally. And I could, unpack that and talk about it all day long. But I think to keep it short, it became the only really strategy at a time when it was really frowned upon to be doing outbound sales and marketing. It wasn't the right thing to do early days of the pandemic. I mean, it just wasn't. Like, any marketer with a conscience knows that we were not going to be selling, right? And particularly in the industry that I'm currently in, which is restaurants. Our company builds restaurant software for large restaurants. And we are now very well positioned coming out of it. But at the time, you did not want to be calling up a restaurateur and saying, hey, so what about your technology? How's it working for you? No. So podcasting became like a very soft way and a very genuine and authentic and just lovely way for me to be able to reach out to the people that not only are in our target audience, but also just to say, how you doing? Come talk. Let's talk. Let's get on air. Let's talk about what's going on at this really difficult time in your business. And at a time when marketing could never be more important for them, because in-store was shut down. So all they had was digital, right? And podcasting became a medium for them too. And I would kind of couch it as, listen, this is a time when we all need to be doing not just branding around our businesses, but also our personal brands. Let's get out and talk about what you're doing. And it was a lifeline, I think, for some of them as well. They've told me, that it helped them then network with each other and build the community that we lost during the pandemic, because our industry, hospitality, is very much anchored on relationships and in-person events and in-person networking. So it was a lifeline for me. And it's continued to be a lifeline. I think not as much this year will be like the only lifeline, because now we're coming out, thankfully. And we're starting to see that other channels are opening up. We're going to get back to events in the fall. So that's what it's been like for me. Yeah.
And how has podcasting allowed you to have better relationships with your customers and partners?
I mean, it's just the conversations, Again, I want to go back to the guru you had on, it'll be a few weeks probably by the time this comes out, but Christopher Lockheed talked about how we've kind of lost authentic dialogue in media and conversation. And there's a beautiful art craft that is in podcasting that's genuine conversation. And we all need it. We all want it. But we've kind of lost it, in particular as marketers. And the early thing I struggle with, and I still struggle with, honestly, is marketers are taught to be perfectionists. Like, we don't say that out loud, but we have it in our DNA. It's like, make everything look good. Make sure there's no edits in your copy. Get the best design out there. You've got a limited amount of time to grab attention. How are you going to do that? And so podcasting doesn't come across as the first thing when that's how you're looking at your audience. But it's having those genuine conversations with people and really caring. Like, this medium allows you to care, and it shows that you care. If you come to it and you're like coming to it with a sales and marketing mentality, you're doing it wrong. You got to come to it with authenticity and care and compassion. And after that, the floodgates pretty much open up.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I try to explain the value of a podcast to a head of marketing, let's say I am in the sales cycle, one thing that I wish sounded cooler was when I say that you get genuine insights into your industry. I don't think anybody wants to start a podcast because of that. I think there's a lot of other things, the content you get out of it. A lot of people employ the account-based podcasting approach. But I think one of the things that I see from folks, and I know you've mentioned it to me before, Jen, is the insights that you get into what people are really thinking and feeling in your industry.
It's like one big focus group. It's like one big focus group. I mean, I don't know if that term is still, we used to have focus groups back in the day where we meet with our target audience, we'd get them in a room, we'd pay them, we'd be like, what's going on with you in your industry? It's one big focus group. Like, it's market testing. It's market validity. It's you hear what's going on with your buyers and your industry. It's way better than reading a Gartner report, okay? Because you're hearing it directly from them.
And I'm sure with restaurateurs, that was incredible to hear because everything was happening in real time for them. So there wasn't even time for a Gartner report to come out because it was all happening there. And what you were on the front lines speaking to these people in real time as new things and new news was unfolding daily. What was that like?
Oh, it was so invigorating. It was so exciting. Here you have restaurants whose, main channel of business has been in store, completely shut down. And I'm on the front lines talking to these marketers who are the creative. And all of a sudden, them working with their ops teams and their tech teams are more on the spot than ever to come up with strategies and hearing these things that they were doing. I remember talking to Matt at Takai, and he was talking about, we're packaging up these take-home kits, where people can make their food at home, and we're putting all the ingredients in there, and we've got these cool bags that they can pick up, and their bags became like a fashion icon accessory on the West Coast, and talking to folks that were launching virtual brands. I mean, virtual brands were starting to become a thing right before, but then hearing these marketers right on the front lines and in an industry that, honestly, one of the other reasons I started the podcast was undervaluing marketing. Tech has lagged behind in restaurants, and therefore the value that marketers bring has lagged behind. They don't have the data that other industries have. And here all of a sudden they're like, boom, way shot out in front. Let's launch these virtual brands. We don't need brick and mortar. All we need is a website and delivery, right? And to hear the amazing things they were doing, not just for their own brands, but then in their communities. They were doing these amazing outreach programs where they were giving their food away for free. They were feeding, frontline healthcare workers. Oh, there was just so much stuff going on. It was so exciting. And I just truly felt honored to be there to get their message out a little bit more.
And I talk about 5 profiles that you can
Mm-hmm.
bring onto a B2B podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Customers, so I've got you here today, so I'm drinking my own Kool-Aid a little bit. Prospects, which could be that account-based podcasting approach. It could be just that, someone who's at a prospective target account would be valuable on your podcast. Partners, internal subject matter experts, and then the industry influencer or external subject matter expert profile. Who do you bring onto your show out of those profiles? Is it something else? Who are your ideal guests?
So I try to keep it about 75% target market brands, so restaurant brands. And our company is very narrowly focused on what we call enterprise restaurant brands. So that means over 25 locations. They have, more than 25 locations in the United States, North America. So I'm about 75% there. I've had other restaurants on that have, slightly less locations, but then the other 25% I really reserve for, like you just said, the influencers in the space, people that are running, marketing agencies, media companies, and have a great message and great information for the marketers. I had a woman on that, works for a data company, and she was, to your point, giving real-time data out to my audience. So thinking about my audience in a pretty niche aspect of, these are marketers, senior marketers, maybe heads of marketing or very senior marketers working for large restaurant brands. What do they want to know right now? And influencers can bring a lot of great information to the table there. So it's a pretty simple, 75-25. And in that first 75, I have had customers on as well. So, and that's a bigger focus for us this year, is to get more of our customers on.
Yeah, for sure. And, my approach tends to be just bring on people who will provide value to your audience. So it doesn't matter if it's a customer, if it's an internal person on your sales team, if it's an external influencer in your space or what have you. Another question I'm interested in, you mentioned your ability to network and spend time with folks who have either during your podcast or afterward. How has your podcast allowed you to do virtual events during the pandemic, build community? What have you done on that front?
A good amount. As you know, once you've built that authentic relationship and you have that trust, you do slowly earn the right to reach out and ask for more of their time. And it has to be in a very careful approach, in the sense that these are super busy people on the front lines during a pandemic trying to pivot their business, right? But I did notice that there was, again, no events going on. So they had lost all of that, which is where they go, honestly, to see what's new and what's happening and to meet each other and network with each other. So it was actually my CEO's idea to bring them back together, post, anyone that had spoken on the podcast, and start doing, we just did little Zoom communities, and we would do Zoom meetups, and started very sort of no structure in the beginning. And I just invited them all, and some of them came and some of them didn't. And we just asked them to, go ahead and talk about whatever you guys want to talk about. And at during the first one, it ended up being the challenges with third-party delivery. They lose a lot of brand control when you have someone in the middle delivering your food. Then I got a little bit more formal. And then the next one we did, I had 3 people present different use cases, success stories, or challenges for the team, because that's actually the feedback I got. They wanted to hear what their peers were doing. And that was phenomenal. I mean, again, the market intel and research and knowledge we got just by hearing some things that they had done recently that had been wildly successful. Again, I think it provided a lot of value. I heard from them it provided a lot of value. So yeah, that's how we've brought people together. I'm overdue for scheduling another one, actually, and it's been on my mind, but just super swamped. So I hope to get everyone back together soon.
And one of the things that we've talked about a little bit is the account-based podcasting approach, which, I used for a while. I've gone away from. We've completely relaunched our show here as a show that focuses more on value. And I think that's what you've done kind of all along, as more of a traditional marketer, where maybe I came from a little bit more of a sales background. And I'm trying to, follow in your footsteps a little bit more. But I'm curious, sales still cares about what marketing is doing. What impact has your podcast had on the sales team?
Okay, can we just hold that question for a second? Because, as you're talking, as you start asking these questions, I'm thinking of things that I think are super important, and that is being comfortable. And I think that's why originally I was like, it's just getting oversaturated, because I was seeing people just doing podcasts, and even in my industry, doing podcasts because it was the thing to do, but not really focused on doing it in a way that was authentic, genuine, and comfortable for them. And then, yes, to your point, being able to add value. It's so important. I mean, I'm not as tuned into some of these, podcasting terms like ABM podcast versus any other kind of podcast, but I think the most important thing is that it's genuine, it's authentic, and that you as the podcast host or hostess are comfortable doing it. If you're not comfortable, then it's not the right thing to do.
Yep.
Right? So, okay. I just wanted to say that piece. I think it's important. I think it's important.
I completely agree. At the end of 2020, Tristan, who's my business partner, and I spent some time really reevaluating what we thought a B2B podcast should be. Should it be something where you're doing outreach to be able to break into target accounts? Mm-hmm. Should it be something that just every business has? And what we really narrowed in on is that to differentiate your podcast, you need to have a niche audience. You speak directly to someone, and you provide value to them in every episode that actually helps them get better at their job. I think that there is a side to podcasting that's a little more selfish, that makes the podcast about me and what I can get out of it. And the podcasts that we see that break through, like yours, are podcasts that really help a target audience. I mean, you early on, when you talked to me about what your podcast was going to be, I remember you telling me, there are not a lot of people in marketing specifically. They have all sorts of titles, the people who contribute to marketing in restaurants. And you wanted to make this content that was very specific for folks who are out there who may not have that many resources at their hands. And I think that has helped you to be able to break through and have an identity and know exactly who you're providing value for, is really understanding that audience and who you want to support. I think it matters so much.
Yeah, and being on a mission. Like, I'm passionate about my mission. I'm passionate about what I saw and observed in the restaurant industry, which was, damn, like there's not even CMOs at some of the largest brands. There's no CMO. There's like a director of marketing is the most senior person. It's like, it's okay. It's not necessarily about the title, but that does tell you something.
Yeah.
You've got a multi-brand 1,000-unit chain that doesn't have a CMO. What is that telling you? The value of marketing has lagged behind in this industry. And so my mission and my passion became to elevate marketers in the industry, to elevate them from a tactical to a strategic level and help the industry understand the value that marketing can contribute. It's not just about, like, I've had some of my guests tell me they thought marketing was the arts and crafts department when I came here. It's not just about the creative and the arts and crafts and the POP displays and the signage in the store. It's also about a lot of other things, like the value we can bring permeates across technology. It permeates across the data and understanding the customer and being the voice of the customer. And that drills down into the product and the products that are being offered and how we're offering them. So yeah, I think being on a mission, having that passion, sure, maybe you don't have it quite to the extent that I do because I'm the marketer as well, but that will come through in terms of the value that you're providing, I think, and getting back to your point and what has been the impact on sales. As I said, it was our lifeline. It was our only marketing project plan strategy during the pandemic. And so sales grabbed onto it and ran with it with me. And they were right there with me. They were my number one favorite fans, we'd post on social media and post every episode and they'd be right up there, listening. And then they started coming along and recommending, other people that I would have on. And I had the awesome, privilege and opportunity of then having like PR agencies reach out to me and start pitching, some of their brands, which was fun. And then this year, it's interesting when you think about that impact of sales, because the impact has been so significant that I'm now like, all right, hold on, guys. Like, wait a minute. They're like, we can do this and we can do that. It's like, I want to keep, and I was thinking about this a lot, like I want to keep the service to restaurant marketers, right? I want to keep the content of value to them. And so I have had CEOs on and presidents of restaurants, but 9 times out of 10, they came from marketing.
Yeah.
They were either CMOs or whatnot. So they can lend that voice and that credibility. But it is easy to kind of get on that runaway train with sales and the CEO who has just been my number one fan and was like, just go for it all along. And he's loved it. And so people start to ideate and innovate, right? And so now I'm thinking, well, if I had another show, what would it be, right? Like, because I'm really kind of protective about preserving that niche and that value that you're talking about.
I'm right there with you. I mean, we became such big proponents of that. I mean, we shut down a 200 episode show and started a new one. We wanted to have a new show that spoke directly to a specific audience, which are small, scrappy marketing teams of 1 to 5 and B2B technology that are thinking about or do have a podcast. So, I mean, that when you have that, then people feel like the show is for me and they want to tune in every week. And then you see the impact on sales rather than trying to force opportunities over to sales. And I think that was an evolution that a lot of people go through and realize that if you create value in your content marketing, that people are going to care about it. And that leads me into my next topic that I wanted to tackle is you are a small but mighty marketing team at Q, and no secret, you've even mentioned it, that the pandemic has hit the restaurant industry. And at a time where you could have kind of gotten small and said, let's pull things back and figure out what to do, you actually went the other direction and got big with your podcast. You went from an every other week podcast to start to weekly throughout the entire pandemic. If you go look at Q's LinkedIn, your website, anywhere where you're updating constantly, you come off as a media publisher in your space, which I think is
That's because of you, Justin. That's because of you. Yes, it is.
That is my question, and leave me out of it. But how has podcasting allowed you to produce and publish so much all the time?
I'm not leaving you out of it, Justin. Sorry. I'm not going to leave you out of it. You guys are, no secret, you're the agency, yes, that we work with. And you guys do a phenomenal job of helping me punch way above my weight. And yes, my whole budget pretty much went out the window during the pandemic. It was like I had 80% of my budget in conferences and trade shows. So there were none. And we reused a very small portion of that and invested it in you guys and having an agency help me professionally do a podcast. We did not want to do one that was me editing the video for Lord. That would not have been good. And so you guys have been my mentors, my pilots, my co-pilot, everything. And you've taught me everything. And so working with you guys, I feel has brought me along so much faster than I would have on my own. Because I do have people asking me about it and launching it, and they want to launch, but they're not sure they want to use an agency. They want to do it themselves. And that certainly might be right for some people, but it was not right for me. My team was small. We're able to reuse, like you said, the content that we get from you guys. You guys write amazing, and I'm a picky writer, you know that. You guys might write amazing, highlights from the show, which go right on our website, just like a blog. They go right on the website. And that is a big part of our website now is showcasing our podcast. And then we promote them on LinkedIn. And, I've changed my strategy a little bit in terms of, asking the guests to promote and how concerned I get about that. And I don't anymore. I just kind of let go of that. And the next thing you know, Chipotle is posting on their corporate LinkedIn, our podcast. I'm like, thank you. And so, amazing things have happened in this continuous podcasting process of letting go and just kind of going with the flow and taking great tips from you guys. It's really been amazing, honestly.
And I promise I did not pay Jen to say these things.
Nope.
But one thing, and we're coming up on our time shortly here, but one thing I wanted to touch on, you did mention Chipotle. I love that story, which is when we first started working together, you said that if you ever land, and you used it as an example, if I ever get to land Chipotle as a guest, that would be huge. And then you did. You now have, I think, the last you told me, the second most engaged with post on Chipotle's LinkedIn page. But talk to me a little bit about that and what that meant to you to do all this work, and then kind of not at the end of it, but we were, coming up towards the end of the year. You've done all this work over the course of 2020 through just an insane year. And then you get your big guest that you really wanted all along. What was that like?
Well, I got to tell you, I mean, even way before I landed Chipotle, I landed Dunkin Donuts. Dunkin Donuts, I think, was number 8.
Yep, that was early on.
And thank God I had a contact there. And she, everyone was this is the hospitality industry. Everyone said yes. Everyone was so kind and generous. It wasn't like, let me think about it. They were like, yes. Everyone said yes. We want to talk. Let's do it. So, I mean, and I've had small brands, medium-sized brands, big brands, and they all are important. Let me just say that first. Like, every single brand I have on is so near and dear to my heart. Every guest is so near and dear to my heart. But yeah, there's a certain amount of validity you get when you land at Chipotle. And let's face it, like a lot of marketers, I'm very competitive, I'm driven. And it was fun for me to have that like internal competition with myself. Like, oh, who can I get next? Like, and yeah, I wanted to go big, I mean, I wanted to do right by the industry and have people on that would bring value, no matter what their size was. But then I also wanted to talk to the players that are really on the front lines doing like super innovating things. And if you haven't heard of it, like Chipotlanes became a big thing, even though, as the guest told me, it's a very small part of their business actually right now. But they made a lot of splash at that time. Jonathan came from retail transformation and was brought into Chipotle to really help with the digital transformation that restaurants are going through now. And just to be with guests like that, like I said, the industry now is changing and marketers are starting to be looked at. Like what I wanted to happen is happening. And to see these brands hiring from outside the industry, bringing these super talented people in that have been through it in other industries and are ready to help guide these brands through a really hard digital transformation, because it's tough with brick and mortar. That is so exciting and invigorating. It's such an honor for me to be able to interview them. Like, yeah, that was just, I was punching way above my weight on that one. I mean, these guys, like you said, I'm a small, scrappy marketer. I've never worked for a company that has, more than, I guess the biggest company I worked for had 500 people. But my marketing teams have always been, on the small side, 3, and on the large side, 15 at the largest. And so super smart, talented folks that I got to talk to. And there's no better, honor and, gratitude than that. I mean, it was just so fun. So, yeah.
And you've used the term now, punching above your weight class, 2 different times, talking about the people that you get to have conversations with, and then the content that you get to create out of it. Mm-hmm. And I think that is and that was, we didn't ever set out to become a podcast agency. We launched a podcast because we wanted to have a voice. And all of a sudden we saw the same things. We're landing conversations with people we would have loved to have had conversations with. Then we're creating this amazing content out of it because we're recording 40-minute sessions with these folks and being able to create video, audio, written content, and publish it all over the web on our website. And I think that's really just a great term. And, I think I'm actually going to title this episode Punching Above Your Weight Class, because it is just such an amazing thing that I think a podcast allows you to do as a small, scrappy marketing team.
Yeah. And the other example I gave of punching up on my weight class was working with you guys.
Noted.
You helped me punch above my weight class for sure.
I really appreciate that, Jen. We are coming up on our time here. I think this is a good time to wrap. Where can people go to learn more about you, about Q, POS, and Restaurants Reinvented?
Well, we have a website. It's called qbeyond.com. So there's that. And my podcast is called Restaurants Reinvented. It's okay. It might not be the thing for your audience. I would say go listen to Christopher Lockheed. He was so amazing. And I'm really excited about your new podcast now that I've started listening to it, because I'm a small, scrappy marketer, always have been, always probably will be. And I am getting a lot of insights from that. So yeah, I'm on all the normal socials and whatnot. But I just want to thank you, Justin, for everything you've done for me and for Q this past year. You've been such a true pleasure to work with. I mean, we have a lot of talk in our industry right now about partners versus vendors. And one of my sales guys says, we're the anti-vendor. We don't ever want to be seen as that. And for me, as a small, scrappy marketer, building trust in an agency has always been a slow process. And I got there pretty quickly with you guys. And that's a huge testament to you and what you're doing and the content that you post on LinkedIn, I learn from all the time. I'm constantly looking at that stuff. So, sure, you can find me, but I say follow Justin, follow Christopher Lockheed. Those are the people to be listening to. So thanks for giving me a few minutes today.
Humble as always, but Jen has been amazing to watch grow from no podcasts really to over 30 episodes recorded in under a year. Jen, thanks so much for coming on. It was a pleasure having you. And we will talk next week.
I'll do one shout out. Go eat out at restaurants.
Yes. All right.
Stop
there
cooking
you go.
at home. Stop cooking at home. Go give restaurants some business. They need it. Whether you go out or you order out, go to your local favorite restaurant and give them some business.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Jen.
Thank you. Have a great day, Justin.
You too.
All right.